Good afternoon. I am Jim Barrett, and I'm honored to serve as the Executive Director of Pisgah Legal Services. And we appreciate you coming to this Lunch and Learn to find out more about one of our programs, which we call the Justice for All program. It's great to see so many of you here today, and I want to thank you all and generous donors who have sustained Pisgah Legal Services for so long. I was asked a couple of years ago by an attorney in Hendersonville, isn't the problem helping immigrants is that all they need is a lawyer? And I had to say, no, that's not the case. The immigration laws are so bad and they're so complicated that while you need a lawyer, if you are going to get legal status, often we can't help everybody who would be benefited by legal status. So I thought if that's the case with an attorney, then probably we have a ways to go in educating ourselves and the general public. So thank you for being here so you can help educate the general public more about the way immigration laws work and the ways they don't work. And we have some of the experts in North Carolina with us today to speak to that. If you're just learning about Pisgah Legal Services, we have lots of material here. Our annual report is hot off the press, and we would love to include you in our emailing list and our quarterly mailing list for our updates. As you know, our poverty law experts provide free legal services in homelessness prevention, domestic violence prevention, access to health care, access to increased income, and other basic needs. Our holistic services help people with multiple challenges to enable them to escape poverty and abuse. So our work also now includes social workers, free tax assistance, expanded ACA health insurance, enrollment assistance, and driver's license restoration assistance, in addition to our free legal services and supported by our attorneys and volunteer lawyers. You can see our website at www.pisgahlegal.org to learn more about our work. Today, as you know, we're focused on our Justice for All program, which serves immigrants. In 2022, we served more than 4,000 immigrants in immigration households in Western North Carolina. Sorry, am I messing up? Just a little distraction. So we have 6 staff members and dozens of volunteers dedicated to working with immigrants to help them navigate complex laws, to secure legal status, work authorization, and to understand their rights to meet basic needs, which are quite challenging depending on the makeup of their household, whether they're citizens born here or parents who weren't born here. We have even more staff, I believe it's more than 20 staff, who are bilingual in Spanish and English. Pisgah Legal has served undocumented immigrants for 25 years, and we had one immigration law attorney for much of that time. We're still the only free resource for legal services in Western North Carolina for immigrants. A few weeks ago, a much-needed third immigration lawyer joined the Pisgah Legal team. He is Leo, and he's here. Where's Leo? Hey, welcome, Leo. Believe me, the rest of the team was cheering much louder than you are when he arrived. Yes. Thanks. See, it's good to have experts. Unfortunately, as the primary provider of free legal aid for immigrants in all of our 18 counties we serve, the demand for our services is much greater than our ability to help, and the waiting list for these services is the greatest of all our programs. And while it is true for all our programs that we could serve more people if we had more funding, the sources of dedicated funding for civil legal aid for immigrants is very limited. And that's why we need your help and the help of many more people to further this important work. During today's program, our staff will provide a bird's eye view of the Justice for All program, as well as a deep dive into our recent Afghan asylum project. There'll be time for questions at the end, so save those up, please. And note that we're recording this session to share with other Pisgah Legal Services friends afterwards. It's my great pleasure to introduce Angie Pena, one of Pisgah Legal's dedicated immigration attorneys. She happens to be based out of our Hendersonville office. We now have 18 offices, 9 of which are staffed, and I really can't thank you enough for making that growth and this great lawyer possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As Jim mentioned, I am one of the immigration attorneys here at Pisgah Legal Services. I specifically do, I'm on the wrong one. I specifically do domestic violence, sexual assault related immigration cases. And I'm going to run through a lot of information, but it is just a very, very brief overview of the immigration work that we do and the immigration work that is done in general in the United States. And go back. So this is a map of our service area. So we take cases from the 18 westernmost counties of North Carolina. And as you can tell, we cover a lot. So I am based in the southeastern part of the county, and Jacob and Thalia are in our Asheville offices, but we cover all of these counties. If we get a case from any of these counties, we'll go out to our clients and try to provide services. So we represent clients who are eligible for work authorizations or lawful status, and the goal at the end of the day is always to get them to a permanent status here in the United States, whether it's legal permanent residence or to become a United States citizen, and that's always the objective, but sometimes we can't get there, so we have other ways of trying to have the person be here in the United States with a temporary or a deferred action status. And I will explain very briefly, and some of this may go, it may go over your head, some of it maybe is going to be a little bit too much information, but I am just going to touch very briefly on all this information. So there are 5 humanitarian-based petitions that we kind of work on mostly. So you can do a family-based petition, an employment-based petition, but I'm not going to touch on those. Pisgah really doesn't do that. The family-based are what you're going to hear about mostly in the rest of the immigration world. Private attorneys, that's where they practice mostly. But as a nonprofit organization, we focus mostly on the humanitarian-based petitions. And those are going to be asylum, U visa, T visa, VAWA, and SIJ. And I will explain very briefly some of these things. So as I mentioned, the family-based petition are the ones where you have a legal permanent resident, spouse, or parent, or child, or a United States citizen, parent, child, spouse, and you can obtain some type of legal status that way. And then there's the U visa petition. So the U visa petition is where you have to be a victim of a crime, and you have to cooperate with law enforcement, and you have to, we have to get a U visa certification from law enforcement stating that you cooperated and you are a victim, and that way we can request a petition. And you have to be a victim of a certain listed crimes, and most of them are violent. There's violence involved in those type of crimes. So VAWA is for people who have been victims of domestic violence, and it can be parents, children, spouses of legal permanent residents or United States citizens. You have to meet certain criteria, and then you can request a VAWA petition. You have SIJ cases. These are what Jacob mostly concentrates on, and those are for children who have been abandoned, abused, or neglected by one or both of their parents. And so it's a 2-step process. Jacob goes through the court system, gets the custody, and then we do the petition with USCIS. We have asylum-based cases. You have to be in the United States because you were persecuted in your home country because you were because of your race, religion, national origin, political opinion, or because you belong in a certain social group. And then your United States citizen is that ultimate goal where you want to get people to. So once you file the petition and they become a legal permanent resident, then they want to be United States citizens. And that is a permanent status that can't, let me rephrase that. It can almost never be taken away. There's certain limitations there, but once you get to a legal permanent resident status, you can travel in and out of the country without any limitation. You can be outside of the country. And that's where we try to, as a undocumented person who starts off in the system, that's the ultimate goal. We have temporary statuses such as DACA. These are for the students who came in when they were minors. They had no say in coming into the United States. They have to have been here prior to June 15th of 2012, again, meet certain requirements when they came into the United States and when they filed. We have TPS, and that's for people who come from certain countries countries that are at war, or there may have been some type of natural disaster there. Recently, Ukraine was added to the list. So Pisgah provides services to all of these counties, and we have partners in all these counties who refer to us. We get referrals from schools, from other health providers. And if they fall within our criteria, we can provide legal services for free. So some of the recent cases that we've been seeing, of course, have been the Afghan asylums who have come into the United States. But even on top of that, we've been taking asylum cases prior to that. We have cases from people who came from Central America or Mexico, and they're fleeing violence. And so those are the asylum cases that we've been seeing previously, or women who have been here in the United States and who have been victims of domestic violence, and we've been able to help them with a U visa petition. Although Jacob will concentrate mostly on the Afghans, and most of this will focus on that project that we did. Pisgah has already been doing this work with the immigration community prior to the Afghan Asylum Project, and it's work that's going to be ongoing, and we're going to keep doing with the immigrant community. Thank you.
I'll raise this microphone up just a little bit. Thank you for that, Angie. Can you hear me? Yeah, sort of? A little more. Okay. A little bit closer. Thank you for that, Angie. Yeah, so as she mentioned, our team has been working in Western North Carolina with immigrants for over 20 years now. And handled a number of different types of humanitarian cases, including a very limited number of asylum cases historically, but some. But that changed about a year ago when Afghanistan was taken over by the Taliban in 2021. Hundreds of thousands of Afghans fled that country in the coming weeks and months, and about 80,000 of them came to the United States. The rest of them are in other parts of the world, and there are many, many people in Afghanistan still at risk because of the Taliban being in control. But what I'm going to talk about a little bit here, and this is also a bird's eye view of this project because this project has really taken on a life of its own. After folks evacuated here to the United States, they went to military bases for a period of time where they were vetted and provided coordination eventually with a quote-unquote refugee resettlement agency and settled throughout the United States, including Asheville, North Carolina, where over 100 Afghan evacuees came. Now I say quote-unquote refugee resettlement organization just because I want to be clear that the folks who fled Afghanistan may be loosely referred to as refugees, but refugee also has a legal definition, and these folks came into the United States without that legal status that a refugee would have, which is a permanent status, which an asylum seeker is seeking to obtain. And so they came into the United States only with a temporary status, with a parole, as we've referred to it, status, to come and have work authorization here for a couple of years while they could try to seek an opportunity for a permanent status here in the United States. Recognizing the need for the ability of the evacuees to be able to normalize their status in a permanent way, Congress did the unthinkable and passed a law in 2021. And that law was for the expeditious processing of asylum claims for Afghans who had been evacuated during the fall of the prior government. And that was excellent because Angie didn't get into it, but the processing times for immigration cases of all kinds are years and years, in some cases decades. And for anybody from any other part of the world, an asylum case might take 5, 6, 7 years to get through the system. They passed a law that said that as soon as you file your application, if you're from Afghanistan and part of this evacuation, within 45 days we'll get you an interview. And within 150 days, they'll get you a decision. They met that 45 days, so we had to work really hard to ensure that these cases were presented and ready for that interview with full, complete evidence and everything prepared. That 150 days to decision, well, it's the government, so I'll talk about that in a minute. Like I said, these refugee resettlement agencies, Catholic Charities and Lutheran Services here in Western North Carolina, we're working with these folks in all kinds of different ways, getting them housing, getting them resettled in so many different ways. But one of those primary ways was also helping them to get legal services. And there was no national agency to do it. Private attorneys hardly had the capacity. It would be extremely expensive to do it. And so we started to talk with them about ways that we could help. Oh, maybe we can take a couple cases. Maybe we can take 5. And then I started talking with Katie, our pro bono director, and she has been working in Western North Carolina with volunteer attorneys for a really long time, and she's like, maybe we can do this. And so we started thinking about how to increase our capacity exponentially, which was the need to be able to do this for folks. And so that's what we did to help these folks navigate the asylum process. The folks who are here come from a variety of different backgrounds in Afghanistan. A lot of folks were part of the associated with the U.S. military, security forces, associated with the previous government, educated women, ethnic minorities. Everybody comes from a different background, but they're all also dealing with everything associated with coming to a new country, cultural differences, suffering from post-traumatic stress, extremely vulnerable population. And so we trained about 30 volunteer attorneys to help submit almost 40 asylum applications, including every bit of evidence, which meant detailed stories about what happened to the individual in Afghanistan, why they're afraid to return, what would happen to them. Big report, 300-400 pages of reports about the country conditions in Afghanistan to submit along with them. Christiana, who's going to talk in a minute about the coordination with these clients and the interpreters and the volunteers to get them there, never mind the volunteer attorney time. Some of them were on Zoom, some of them were in person. All it took to be able to get this done, multiple meetings with each individual client, to get these applications filed before these folks were here for a year, which is the requirement under law to submit that application within the first year. So we worked all summer on this project and through the fall, and those 45 days started coming along, and we realized these folks really need help at these interviews too, because that wasn't really what we had initially thought about doing, because we were like, that's all the way in Arlington. We'll get these applications filed for folks, and then at least we'll get them filed. No, we can't leave them hanging like that, right? So we trained another about 20 volunteers. Some folks went from Asheville up there. Some folks appeared remotely. But then we trained another bunch of volunteers in the DC area to be able to assist these folks with their asylum interviews. And the asylum interviews are extremely intense. They are 2, 3, 4, up to 6 hours sometimes, of course with an interpreter, into extremely detailed information about some of the most traumatic experiences these folks have ever gone through and the fear that of return that they have. So that was sort of this whole second phase that we undertook without initially planning to, because these folks were just going to be too vulnerable to some misinterpretation, saying something wrong that could sink their case in this 4, 5, 6 hour interview. And so that's what we've been doing over the past roughly year. It was just over a year ago that we had our initial presentation to the Afghan evacuee community here at a church down the street. And it's been an amazing experience working with these folks. We're working with these attorneys, these other volunteers. I'm not even gonna bother calling out people, because I think about half the people in the room have had some part in this, whether it's driving people to their appointments or being a volunteer attorney themselves, or in some other capacity, staff members as well. There's Julia, my supervisor, who took on 2 of these cases herself, and she did such an awesome job. Anyway, everybody had a part in it. Thank you all for those of you in this room who participated in this. And it's ongoing. I wish I could stand up here today and say that 150 days came along for each and every one of these cases, and we got a decision. I can say that every decision we have had so far has been a positive decision. We just got our 9th approval this morning, which is about 25% of the cases we filed have had decisions, all positive, but now a lot of these folks are still in limbo. Their families, a lot of them separated from their families, who are still in Afghanistan, still at risk, and it's stressful and it's challenging, and it could be many, many more months before we hear back. And Katie's going to talk a little bit about sort of what's still to come as we're moving into this unpredictable waiting period for these decisions. But thank you all for coming, and we have a couple other speakers here to share about other aspects of this program. Christiana is going to talk next. She was the coordinator for this project, and she started at Pisgah Legal Services 3 weeks before this project, and she's amazing, and she's going to tell you a little bit about the work that she did in this project.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to this Lunch and Learn about the Afghan Asylum Project. My name is Christiana Gasparjan. I am the pro bono coordinator at Pisgah Legal Services. This project was and is very meaningful to me for a number of reasons. As a former refugee from Armenia who grew up in Germany, coupled with a decade of professional and volunteer experience working with refugees, asylees, and immigrants, I have an understanding of the challenges and complexities that individuals and families face when seeking safety in a new and foreign country. So in the next 10 minutes, I would like to give you a little bit of background of the non-legal side of this project. I will actually start with a few words on Afghanistan, followed by the challenges we faced during this project, as well as a very quick glimpse into our day-to-day work. So before getting into more details about our project and work with our clients, I would like to just take a minute to note that Afghanistan is a beautiful country with a rich history. Most of what Western media shows us is usually related to war, oppression, the Taliban, and religious extremism. But Afghanistan is also so much more than that. So I would like to invite everyone who hasn't already to learn a little bit of Afghan history and culture to expand this view of the country. And here are just some starting points. So Afghanistan is a country in Central Asia, surrounded by multiple countries: Pakistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and China. Its history actually dates back over 5,000 years, with various empires invading and conquering. There's a population of 39 million, with Pashtuns being the largest ethnic group, followed by Tajiks, Hazaras, Uzbeks, and others. The official languages are Dari and Pashto, with other languages such as Uzbek and Turkmen also spoken. Afghanistan has a rich cultural heritage as well, blending Persian, Indian, and Central Asian influences. Major festivals include Nowruz, which is the Persian New Year, which was actually just last month, and the Orange Flower Festival. Oops. So this work was nothing like Pisgah Legal Services has taken on before in terms of complexity. In any project, there are bound to be challenges and issues that arise, and the same was true for this project. Some obstacles we faced in the early stages was to provide two language services, since our clients either spoke Dari and or Pashto. Quick shout out, actually, we are incredibly grateful to our translators and interpreters for providing such skilled and professional contributions to this project. They were really amazing. Another challenge that we encountered was that our clients had different levels of literacy, from reading and writing in multiple languages to not reading or writing in their spoken language. This made it difficult to communicate effectively sometimes, and we had to rely solely on verbal communication. Bureaucracy and the lengthy process were also difficult challenges we faced, and our clients also did not expect this process to be either this lengthy or this difficult. USCIS, as you probably know, is taking longer than expected and causing delays and adding to the overall complexity of the project. Afghanistan operates on a different calendar. Birthdays, addresses, exact spellings are not recorded in the same way than here. Of course, the trauma of our clients was a big part and a challenge in this project. People experience persecution, having to live with the fact that their families are still living in danger, children being abducted by the Taliban. PTSD is also a trauma response that played into it. Another trauma response is also that I have seen from many refugees that I've worked with in the past and can also relate to is survivor's guilt, where you feel guilty for being safe, where you wish you could trade places with family members, but you can't. And you feel guilty for being guilty because you know you're supposed to be grateful. So these things can be very difficult on your mental health as well, and were obviously a challenge. The intake process was also a very vulnerable part of gathering information, and some stories really weighed heavy on our hearts. One of our clients was shot by the Taliban when they took over, and his wounds were so severe that he lost consciousness. So he was actually, I guess, rescued by US forces who took him on a plane, but he wasn't aware of it. So he left his family unknowingly in Afghanistan. So to know that his and many other families are still in Afghanistan facing hardship and danger every day is a heavy burden to bear. They are living in hiding, constantly on the move to avoid detection by the Taliban, and the fact that some of our clients' children have been taken by the Taliban and tortured is really almost too much to bear. So in all of these challenges, we were able to overcome some of them by staying focused on our goals and working together as a team. We utilized our creativity and resourcefulness to find solutions to the problems we encountered. Lastly, I would like to provide you with a quick glimpse into our day-to-day work. Generally speaking, this project was very high-paced and demanding. It required flexibility, adaptability, and collaboration. We had to be prepared to reprioritize often and fast to ensure that our clients' needs are met. We had 2 phases. I guess technically we are in phase 3 now. For phase 1, obviously some of the tasks included scheduling Zoom appointments and intakes, gathering information, and of course getting them translated. The team needed to stay in constant communication with our partners, volunteers, tracking project details, expenses. In some cases, we had to pick up our clients from their homes to ensure that they would make it to their appointment. This really required a high level of flexibility, as we needed to adjust our schedules on a very short notice to accommodate our clients' needs. We also gathered exhibits, and for that we conducted research, collaborated with other professionals to ensure that we have all the information we needed to support our clients' asylum claims. Our clients also had different one-year deadlines depending on their day of entry, so we had to keep that in mind as well. Okay. So during phase 2 of the project, the team focused on recruiting additional interpreters in the Arlington area to support USCIS interviews. The team communicated with our partners from Lutheran Services and Catholic Charities regarding transportation, lodging for our clients and their families. Interview preparation was definitely a key focus in that phase of the project. We had to make sure that the interpreters were always connected with the volunteers and the volunteer attorneys, especially closer to the day of the interview. The interviews could actually also last up to 6 hours, so that was something that we had to keep in mind as well. So throughout all of these tasks, collaboration was essential. We worked closely with our clients, attorneys, interpreters, partners, to ensure that everyone was on the same page and that we were all working towards the same goals. Thank you.
You can see some of our key partners and donors and funders, many of which are in this room, I believe. My name is Katie Russell Miller, and I'm the Managing Director of Community Engagement at Pisgah Legal Services. And in my role, I oversee our pro bono program. So I had the great privilege of working with Jacob and Christiana and many others to make this work happen over the past year. I've been at Pisgah Legal for 17 years and a social worker for 25 plus years. And this honestly is the most tremendous project I've ever been involved in, both in terms of the intensity of the situations of our clients. I remember last year when we were all sitting in a room at the information session at St. Mark's with 60, 70, 80 Afghans, and we had all been watching on television about the Taliban takeover and the evacuation efforts and all those images of people at the Kabul airport trying to escape, hanging onto planes. And we were sitting in a room with people who had experienced those realities. And to me, that was really unreal, just to imagine what those people had been through to get into that room. And so it has just been, I hate to use a positive word to describe the experience, because we're talking about doing work that is necessary because of tremendous suffering. But this has been a very impactful experience, I think, for all of us who've been involved. And I know many of you in this room have helped to make this happen. You heard Jacob say that a year ago we took on this work and we intended to have a limited scope. That's what we said. We would complete asylum applications for somewhere between 40 and 50 people we expected. We'd put them in the mail to USCIS within a few months. Deadlines were starting in August, September, October. We knew we had to fly and get these complicated things done. And that would be the extent of it. We would have gotten our clients off to a good start, started the path for them. As we started working with folks, as Christiana described, the trauma, the language barriers, the cultural barriers, the fact that folks who had come from small villages in Afghanistan could not begin to grasp our complicated, sometimes awful legal system and navigate it to get to where they needed to go. We decided that we didn't really have a choice. We needed to see it through and help them to get to Arlington to do those interviews, which, as Jacob said, were supposed to happen within 45 days of submitting applications. So we continued to scramble August, September, October, November, got all the interviews done with help of Catholic Charities and other folks who drove families, individuals from here to Arlington. And I've already used up most of my time, and it's only so bottom line is we did a lot of work and we thought we were going to be done. We thought that by March, because of that 150-day deadline, everybody was going to have their decisions, and they were all going to be affirmative decisions, of course. Everyone was going to get asylum. Well, we're now almost into May, and we luckily got good news this morning that our 9th client got asylum, but that's a lot of people who are still waiting, and they're anxious, they're scared. As we've said many times, they're very, very concerned about their families who are still in Afghanistan. This is only the first step. Once we get them asylum, they have to get green cards, and then they have to wait years and years to petition for their families to come. So I wanted to share one other thing with you about, sorry, I've been talking off the cuff without my slides. I want to share with you one thought about what Afghans deserved and what our country has done very inadequately. So the vast majority of our clients worked for the US military, some of them for years. I interviewed one client who I think had worked for the US security forces for 10, 12 years. They were stationed far from their families. They were in a war zone. They were killing Taliban fighters and fearing for their own lives every day. They did all of this for US government and allied forces. When the Taliban took over, the US evacuated them, and they thought, many of them told me, they thought that the US was giving them status. Like, you come, you're welcome here, you've got status. And then they get here and find out they have to go through all of these complicated hoops. They thought that their families would come very soon. It's going to be years before people's families are able to come. So clients are frustrated, angry, and anxious, understandably so. And so what I'm very glad of is that our community has come together, our community has come together to help bridge as many gaps as we can. Pisgah Legal has done the legal part. Catholic Charities and Lutheran Services have done a lot of work, housing, jobs, schools, everything you can think of. Many of you in this room have given your time and money, and I would love for everybody who has either volunteered, sent a check, driven somebody to Arlington, done legal work, if you would just stand for a minute, that would be great. Thank you all. This has been a massive effort for Pisgah Legal and a massive effort for our community. And as we've said, it has not ended. We thought we would be done last month, and unfortunately for the last 6 weeks, Ben Gilbert and Jacob and others probably in this room have been cranking out dozens of work authorization renewals that have to be done because these folks don't have their decision yet. And next month, we're going to have to make the hard call. Are we diving into more than 100 temporary protected status applications so that people who don't have their asylum decision when their humanitarian parole expires won't have a gap in their status and be at danger of entering into immigration court for somebody to decide if they can stay or go. So we have a lot more work to do, a lot more hours to put in, a lot more interpreters to pay, but we're going to see it through. Yes?
So, if our family does not hear whether or not they have asylum, at what point in time do we begin to panic and call you and say we need to do something?
Well, so again, so the question was from a volunteer who's working with a client, and the question was what to do if the application has gone beyond the normal processing time, which at this point, any application that remains pending is beyond the normal processing time, at which point to panic. So we have been in touch with our clients, almost all of them, to have discussions about this, and so we're working to do that. And if you're working with any clients that you know have questions for us and are having difficulty accessing me or someone else to ask their questions to, please have them reach out to us. Sometimes we like to turn around our responses to our clients as quick as possible, but with interpretation being required for almost any conversation, it might take a little bit. So don't panic, ever, please, hopefully. But we're working, as Katie said, to help folks at least get that extended work authorization, so they're not at risk of having their work authorization expire over the next few months. And I don't know how long these cases are going to take. We just don't know.
That this is a national issue. Everybody who's applied across the country is having the same issue, and so no news is not necessarily bad news. It's likely not bad news. It's just that the government got tens of thousands of these applications and isn't processing them very fast.
Right. Yeah, we just hit 25% of our cases having decisions today with this newest approval. And I've been in contact with other organizations around the country who are having it, that they're still at like a few for like a couple hundred cases they've filed. They've gotten less than 10 back, so we even have a better ratio than a lot of them. But the frustration is national. There's been articles in the national papers about it. Somebody just needs to eventually sue USCIS about it, but I don't even know how quickly that will cause them to issue those decisions.
Yes.
So at this stage in the program, how can someone that has not been involved to date, how can they add value to the process?
That is a great question. He asked if someone hasn't been involved in this project up to now, how could they be useful at this point? I would say some of the people in the room are doing some of the day-to-day support of Afghan asylum seekers in our community, and you might want to connect with them. To be blunt, and Allie will be up here in a minute, we need financial support. We're shelling out, tons and tons on interpretation services to keep this project going, so that's a major need for us. Jacob's working for free, so we don't have to worry about that. But financial support, and then I know there are lots of ways that Afghan families in the community still need support with jobs, housing, day-to-day type stuff. Luckily, we don't have to get anybody else to Arlington anytime soon that we know of, so that phase of supporting us on those things has ended for the moment, but thank you for asking. Somebody else had their hand up. Yes?
Yes, you mentioned that you got, 100 Afghan refugees here, and you're working with less than half of those. What's happening to the others?
So what we did is we submitted. Sorry. The question is, we were talking about 100 evacuees in the community, but we're talking about less than half of those in number of asylum applications we filed. So some folks didn't work with us for one reason or another. We're helping some other folks with other paths to residency for a few folks. And some folks have migrated out of Western North Carolina. I don't know where the folks are at Lutheran Services and Catholic Charities. I don't know how many folks from the evacuation still remain here. But the number of folks we're actually serving is a lot higher. It's probably in the high 60s because of families. And if we submit an application, for example, for the father in a family whose wife and 2 young children are here, the wife and 2 young children would also be able to benefit from an approved asylum application. And so that would be 4 individuals served in that one case. Many folks are here, single folks who don't have a wife and children back home, or single folks who do have a wife and children back home. So that's where that number is. The same is a lot lower.
Last summer, we did a lot of work to get, I think it was 7 applications started for one extended family, and in the middle of the process, they decided they were moving.
Did you find anyone already in Asheville-Buncombe County who spoke the languages that you needed for translation purposes?
There are people in our community we know that speak very few, as you can imagine, when we started looking for Dari and Pashto interpreters, which Christiana did a great job at hunting them down. There was nobody local that stepped up except for one man who is actually an evacuee himself. He worked as an interpreter embedded with the U.S. Marines for 10 years. And he was on the side, I guess, a pharmacist and also going to med school. But he spoke Pashto, so we had him do some in-person interpretation. He was the only one, though. Everyone else, we would Zoom in from Arlington. We had one guy in Australia or New Zealand, I think. Yeah, Western North Carolina is a tough place to find Pashto speakers. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm Lindsay, I work at Catholic Charities, and I just wanted to say, I think everybody's in your room and just being here, what a gift Pisgah Legal has been in this process. It went from no one's coming till the next week, you know, get ready to go to the airport. And it has been such a community effort, and to have Pisgah Legal Services and so many people come alongside our new neighbors has been such a gift. And I just wanted to personally, in front of everyone, say thank you, because we're so grateful. And I was working with a family that's in Canada now. I'm sorry, they have family there. And it's all so loved and cared for here. And so there are so many different pieces to this puzzle that it was very hard to figure out and work through. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you, because it has been, I mean, it's a gift to, I'm kind of like, wow, it's been a year since that event. It's been very busy and full, and so I'm very grateful for y'all, so thank you.
That's good, right? Thank you. We'll be hanging around after if folks have additional. One more? Okay, one more, and then we'll be hanging around for a little while after.
Volunteer help and financial donations, other items, in particular school supplies, or other donations that are currently needed?
That's a good question for some of you from Catholic Charities.
The question was, are there needs for aside from volunteer opportunities and for financial donations, are there needs for things such as I think that you mentioned children's clothing or things of that nature, and yeah, Catholic Charities might have a better response to that. So,
I'm also Catholic Charities. If you want to donate things or money to Catholic Charities or Lutheran Services, you can catch us afterwards. I know Lutheran Services is also here. I can give you my card with my email on it. But we are constantly looking for new furniture, new supplies for homes especially. We're still getting new clients constantly. A lot of the Afghans that we work with already are more settled here and have housing, but they are looking for new things. And then we're constantly getting new refugees as well that the Pisgah Legal Services helps us out with.
Hey everybody, I'm Allie Wilson. I'm the Chief Development Officer with Pisgah Legal Services, and I just want to close us out. First, I know there is a lot of interest in this room, so like Jacob said from Catholic Social Services, if you're interested in getting involved or donating to Catholic Social Services or Lutheran Social Services and you can't catch them afterwards, we'll have a sign-up sheet at that name tag table so we can connect you guys. So I know there's a lot of interest in this room, which is just great. So I want to first start by saying thank you for your presence and attention today. I'd be interested to hear what your takeaways were. One of my takeaways from this afternoon, and actually just any time that I talk to one of our immigration attorneys, is how complex our immigration system is. It's just overwhelming. And it's virtually impossible for anyone to navigate on their own, let alone someone who has dealt with unspeakable trauma and numerous barriers. So I am just so grateful for the immigration team and all the volunteers on that who work alongside our clients every day as attorneys and advocates. So can we just give them a round of applause? And as you can tell, our immigration work right now is critical. Our Afghan neighbors continue to need vital support from Pisgah Legal on their asylum applications, while the existing immigration landscape here was already pretty dire. According to data compiled by Syracuse University, North Carolina ranks last in the country for legal representation in immigration cases before the immigration courts. And as you've heard today, we have just 3 immigration attorneys to serve the thousands of immigrants in the 18 counties of Western North Carolina. So this situation can seem daunting, but I can take comfort because of all of you who are here today. We filled this room with people who are interested and engaged in this work. And so now, you knew it was coming. I need to ask for your help. We need you to sustain this Justice for All program. Today, we are launching our Together We Dream Challenge. Our goal is to raise $100,000 by July 1st to support this important work for Afghan asylum seekers, for immigrant survivors of domestic violence, for all immigrants in need of legal assistance in Western North Carolina. So I invite you to join with us today and make a gift. And here are a few ways that you can do that. You can go to pisgahlegal.org/dream to make an online gift. You can use Venmo on your phone. We are at Pisgah Legal. You can use one of the envelopes at your table. And maybe you're sitting there thinking, but what else can I do? Perhaps you want to inspire others to give by establishing a match for this challenge to help us reach our goal. If you do, you can talk to me, Jim Barrett, or another Pisgah Legal staff member about that or other ways to give. And one thing everyone in this room can do is help us spread the word. We'd love it if you shared what you learned today with a friend, a neighbor, or colleague, because we're always looking for ways to grow our circle. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for standing alongside Pisgah Legal for Justice for All. Take care.